Good afternoon. We will start the committee of the whole shortly. Good afternoon. The Cuyahoga County Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, March 24th, 2026 will please come to order. The time is about 2:34, and I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Good afternoon, everyone. As a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Also, as a reminder to all meeting attendees seeking parking validation for today's meeting, please be sure to scan the QR code located on the back table near the chamber's entrance to claim your discount. If you do not already have a Metropolis account, you will need your license plate number to set up the account in advance of receiving your discount. Please be sure to complete this prior to the end of today's meeting, as the QR code will be removed at the conclusion of the meeting. Calling the roll, Mr. Hauser. I'm sorry, that should be Mr. Sweeney first.
Present.
Mr. Castleberry.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Schlepper.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Mr. Jones. Ms. Turner's absent at the moment. Mr. Hauser. Ms. Simon. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Council President Miller.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody signed in?
Lou.
Good afternoon. Well, today we have a serious topic. We will have a discussion here, or we will pass the resolution, but still, I guess we will discuss it. Now, what I want to talk about is a funding issue, funding for everything this county may encounter. Will we really fund this project on Garfield Heights enough money so this building can be pest-free the whole time? On the other hand, homeless service. The shelter's funding has never been sufficient. It has always been inadequate. So, for service provider try to make the use out of the budget they can receive, lots of things they are forced to cut corners. For example, pest control is not a regular item. This is the reason why 2227 Avenue has pest control for the whole time I have known, at least for the time I have been there. But in the past, once YWCA received the contract, they did have two good service coordinator, the first two. They will arrange programs like having people coming in for Mother's Day or holiday season to take care of the haircuts for people. Now, that does help, but not enough. But at least they have tried that. During COVID-19, all these things had to be stopped because you cannot have dangerous congregated situation. Now, with the construction inside of 2227 Payne Avenue, I already reported to you, this is how all those pests came out. To fall on people, to get on people, including the person coming to the meeting last year, July. She saw bed bugs dropping down from the ducts, personally. Thank you.
That concludes the public comment portion for today's meeting.
Thank you very much, and we have 2 legislative matters referred to the committee, and the first one is Resolution 2026-0074.
Resolution 2026-0074, making an award on requisition 7867 to Burns and McDonnell Engineering Company, Inc., in the amount not to exceed $1,800,000 for building commissioning services for the Cuyahoga County Corrections Center project.
Good morning, or afternoon, sorry. Nicole English with Public Works. So this contract was put out as an RFQ actually back in 2022, when we initially thought we needed to get them under contract sooner than later. But as we worked on the project and pushed along, it really wasn't needed as early as 22. So we've been working the last year to negotiate with the contract. Building commissioning is a piece of engineering that happens during construction and after. They essentially test all the systems that are put in by the contractor to be sure they are performing to the specification that they're supposed to be. So there's a laundry list of items that are listed in the contract, anywhere from HVAC systems, electric systems, electronics, card readers. They will go through and make sure everything is functioning as per plan as our representative. Why we need this so early, though, because you're going to say we don't have HVAC right this second, is as part of the lead commissioning of the project, they need to be contracted before construction starts so that they are part of the design team reviewing the specs as they go in to the project. So they have a limited scope that's going to happen now, and then really most of the work that's going to happen after the building is constructed and when we're doing final testing on the project. So that's what building commissioning is. There was 3 submissions that came in. Burns McDonnell was scored as the highest vendor. They were very strong in both their firm's experience in doing this type of work for buildings of this size and this type, because there's going to be a lot of security and electronics in the jail that aren't in a typical building. And then also the amount of staff that they're able to provide so that we can ensure that the schedule is met, that they're doing the testing when we need it so that we can keep our schedule. This is in several task sections that you could see per the contract. I know there was some question, if we didn't do lead certification, would the price go down? We believe about 100,000 of this is related to specifically the lead work that has to be done. So a small portion would come out if we didn't pursue the lead certification. However, the rest of it you would still do to make sure we have an adequate building system. Happy to answer any questions.
So thank you very much for the presentation, and my understanding is that it would be helpful if this were passed on second reading suspension. Is that correct, and if so, why?
Correct. Because of where we are in the design, they actually have been consulting with Gilbane just on starting to talk through what they need to without a contract, because the schedule is progressing. And so it would help to have them under contract so that they can officially be part of the project team as we move forward.
Are there any questions by my colleagues? Councilman Gallagher.
What fund does this come out of?
It's part of the project fund, so it's in the 910 of the budget that we've been talking about.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to refer with second reading suspension?
Motion, second reading suspension.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The resolution is referred to full council.
Ordinance 2026-0001, amending Chapter 703 of the Cuyahoga County Code entitled Justice Center Capital Projects Fund.
Good afternoon, members of council. Eric Janis, Chief of Staff. Today, the administration will be presenting two important items related to the financing and construction of Cuyahoga County's new jail. As you all know, this project follows more than a decade of reports, assessments, and discussions regarding the condition of the existing jail and the need for a modern, consolidated facility that meets updated state standards, operational best practices, and is a safer, more humane place for residents and for staff. Much of the work has been informed by an ongoing collaboration with this council and with stakeholders throughout the justice system, including previous briefings on site selection, conceptual design, jail programming, project budgeting, and the financial modeling that supports today's legislation. Since taking office in 2023, the county executive established a project team that includes Public Works, Department of Finance, the Sheriff's Department, and County Administration, as well as our owner's representative and the Gilbane Design Build Construction team. This group has been thoughtful and deliberate over the last nearly 3 years of planning for this project, with a consistent focus on managing costs and reducing the chance of cost overruns. As a result, the team has worked tirelessly to refine the project scope, evaluate design options, and identify efficiencies and cost savings that preserve the core goal of delivering a safe, modern, high-quality facility. Despite the economic challenges of this past year, the team has kept the project's price stable. I want to thank them for their sustained efforts. Issuing bonds is a necessary and critical step to moving the jail project forward. The financing legislation being introduced later this evening provides the authorization needed to fund the project's costs. Approving the legislation keeps the project on schedule and positions the county to move forward with the planned bond issuance in June. The legislation is the first of two pieces related to the bond issuance. On April 14th, the administration will introduce legislation related to the final guaranteed maximum price by our design build construction team. Bob France, the county's financial advisor, is here to present the recommended plan for the bond issuance, and Jeff Applebaum, the county's owner's representative in Public Works, are here to answer any questions you may have. The other item you will hear this afternoon, the next item, relates to the Justice Center Capital Projects Fund. As recommended by our subject experts, the legislation proposes changes to the county code to alleviate potential federal tax restrictions related to bond yields, and importantly, to obtain the best possible credit rating by the ratings agencies before the bond issuance. These two items ensure that the county is taking every step possible to protect taxpayer dollars. Bob France will also present this item, as well as bond counsel Rebecca Prinzhorn, and they'll be available to answer any questions that you have. We urge your consideration and approval of these items as you move forward to continue to proceed on the bond issuance in June and to move the jail project forward with construction. I'll now turn it over to Bob and Rebecca, who will present on the Justice Center Capital Projects Fund legislation. Thank you.
So before Mr. Franz presents, I'm just going to note for the record that Councilman Jones is now in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council President, council members, my name is Bob Franz. I am a managing director at Stiefel, and I am the county's municipal advisor. So thank you for indulging me today on this very important topic. For this particular piece of legislation, wanted to provide a little bit of context and background. When the council extended the 0.25% sales tax, it created this fund to restrict the, can you hear? You good? Okay. To restrict the 0.25% for capital-related items only at the Justice Center, courthouse, and the jail project. What we are proposing here is a series of amendments to address the items that Eric Janice just outlined there, but wanted to provide a little bit of context before we kind of get into the meat of it. As you know, and as just stated, and in front of you later this evening is an ordinance or resolution to issue upwards of $980 million of bonds for the project. It is a very important piece of legislation. It is a very big bond issue, the largest that the county's ever done. Overnight, this will double the county's bond indebtedness for a single project. We're not taking this lightly, which is why we're looking at this piece of legislation to try to drive down the borrowing cost as much as we can. The bonds will be issued as general obligation bonds, which will carry the full faith and credit of the county. So it's not limited to the 0.25%. It's the bond rating will be based on the holistic credit characteristics of the county. The economy, wealth metrics, financial performance, management, budgeting practices, et cetera, and also debt. And embedded in the credit rating agency framework is an underlying philosophy of budget flexibility, which is really important for counties in Ohio and other issuers across the country who are reliant on economically sensitive tax revenues like sales tax, as opposed to what is thought of as more stable revenue streams, property taxes, or income taxes. So what we are proposing here are three groupings of amendments to achieve three goals. One, alleviate federal tax considerations. Two, the bond rating concerns. And three, making sure that we're in no way, shape, or form trying to impair or alter prior agreements that we've extended to sales tax revenue bond investors. So it's a little convoluted there, but wanted to make it clear what the objectives are here. We are in no way, shape, or form trying to seek approval, administration seeking approval for spending money outside of your purview and outside of your approval. That's simply not happening. What we want to do is try to get the best possible bond rating and to drive down the borrowing costs so that we can keep as much money at the county as possible. That's what this is trying to achieve. And I'm going to ask Becky to come up and talk about the federal tax considerations.
I didn't want to steal your thunder.
Oh, you're good.
My name's Rebecca Princehorn. I'm representing our firm, Bricker, Grade & Wyatt. We have the privilege of serving as bond counsel for the county on this transaction. I'm a fill-in for my partner, Catherine Swartz. I won't give you the whole litany, but let's just say their spring break trip to India, they couldn't get there because the airport was bombed, and now they're on the flooded island of Oahu. So she'd probably rather be here, but it's the last spring break before the oldest goes off to college. So they really wanted to try and get away. I've been at Bricker for a very long time. It will be 45 years in May. And part of what I do is what we call the traditional side, general obligation debt, real things for real people. And I say that because one of the things that we try to do in that regard as bond counsel is put the issuer, the county in this case, in the best possible position, best possible. In an ideal world, you would be able to issue tax-exempt securities for public projects and never be questioned. And that is not the world that we are in. Yours is an extremely large transaction. And because of that, it might, you never know, but it might invite scrutiny. We've had 4 clients have IRS examinations since January. I hesitate to characterize them as fishing expeditions, but you kind of got that inference. None of the 4 had any problems. And again, the goal is to put you in the best position so that if a very large issue attracts attention, you are in a good place to be able to say, no, we weren't trying to circumvent the rules, but we were trying to take advantage of the rules to the benefit of our constituents. So that sounds very academic and theoretical. Let's talk a little brass tacks. I've characterized this to the law director as best and better. These amendments put you in the best category. If you were under an examination, it's a clear statement. This is general obligation debt. This is not sales tax supported debt. And there are provisions in the revised code for sales tax supported debt, and you have some. That is not this transaction. This is general obligation debt. And what we want to do is be able to say, best. We had no intent to do anything other than general obligation debt. We don't have other money over here that's pledged or otherwise securing this debt. Now, you have had a sales tax extension, which provides flexibility to the county overall, but that revenue is not pledged to support the debt, and the best way to evidence that is to pass these amendments. Is it the only way? No. You could do better instead of best. And better is giving the standard tax representation that we ask of all our clients, that we don't have other money that could have been used in lieu of borrowing on a tax-exempt basis. Do you think the federal government wants you to borrow on a tax-exempt basis? Of course not. And they're going to look around. Did Cuyahoga County really need to borrow? We would say no. This is general obligation debt, and there was no pledge. That's best. But we could drop down and do better, which would be the standard representation that there aren't these other monies laying around that were intended to be used for debt service. Absolutely. That's better. It's not best. And you as a council will just need to decide your comfort level. I tell you this because I know there's been discussion about whether we can drop number D and still give a clean bond counsel opinion, an unqualified opinion as to the tax status of these bonds. And I like to think of it as not that people don't love Cuyahoga County, of course, but the reason people buy these bonds is because they're tax exempt. That's the engine that drives this car. And so the ideal is, again, a clear statement, but if that is not acceptable, you could drop D and we could still give an unqualified tax opinion on the bonds. The other side of this is it's easier if we go best to say, and that money over there from the 0.25%, not pledged, not securing. It's general obligation debt of the county. Why should we have to restrict our investment of that? Because that's another gotcha that the IRS might suggest if they examine this deal. And I think we can say, again, if we have the standard rep, unqualified opinion, and we can say there was no pledge. there was no pledge, we shouldn't have to artificially restrict our investments. And given, mentioned the economy and so forth, you want to be able to raise some investment earnings, to have some contingency. This is a big project with lots of parts. So I don't mean to beat this with a stick. Are there questions of council?
Yes,
Who's first?
I don't know. I can ask
Okay.
one question now. Thank you, through the chair. When we're talking about why are we restricting if it's not pledged? That's your comment, right? That
We would
But-
say you shouldn't have to restrict
if
if it's not
if
formally
it's not formally
pledged.
pledged. But isn't letter B that's added as a proposal, opening that up to not being restricted? This is M&O expenses, adding that component, which is not restrictive. It actually is another use and purpose than construction.
B helps. B helps.
Okay, so we're stating here that they're not, yeah, there's flexibility, so that helps.
B helps.
And,
However,
go ahead.
D makes it crystal clear.
But D
D
has
is-
other consequences,
D
right?
has other
But It
consequences.
has other consequences that,
I recognize that.
okay. And whose idea was it to add D?
That's a question that I was not privy to. And I would say it may have emanated from discussion with our tax committee, that would make it crystal clear. But again, that's best. If better is of more comfort, fine. But we would ask for the standard tax recital in our tax compliance certificate that there's no other replacement fund or available fund.
Absolutely. And would we want that, no matter what this language says, to have this compliance
Well,
certificate?
that's standard,
So we're
so
going to do it anyways.
You're going to do it anyway, but it
Okay.
alone,
And monitoring, better. Okay, thanks, that's it for now. I have several questions.
On that point,
Councilman Sweeney.
thank you. You asked a question on who you didn't know. Can we find out who?
well, my guess is it's from our
We just don't, I would find out who, guessing, and maybe, I'm not being disrespectful, just let us know who.
No,
At your ti-
I don't
at your
know
convenience.
who wordsmithed that particular provision. I do know that the advice of our tax committee was that D would be best.
Oh, I got best and better. I'm learning as we go and through the chair. Amendment number D was presented by somebody, and you're saying the tax group did it absolutely.
Our firm has a tax committee like most firms
So this
do.
is your tax, this is your internal
Tax
group
people.
coming from Bricker that said do this. Thank you. I'm just clear now.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. President. On that same point, somebody drew this document up from the county. Somebody put this D in this. Is there anybody in this room that knows who put this D in here? Okay, I guess not.
I mean, we were involved in edits to this. I'm not sure exactly who drafted what.
Council President, to Councilman Greg Huth, I drafted the ordinance.
If I may. Thank you. So, all right, so you drafted the ordinance, and who wanted it, that D put into the ordinance?
That wording came from Bricker, from our bond council.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Simon.
Just to follow up, so we're talking about best and better, and if we remove D, it still will be better, correct? And if we remove C with this umbrella for public safety and justice, it would still be better than currently drafted or written.
D is what really makes it crystal clear. C is a little bit on the bubble.
We probably don't need C.
That's council's choice.
That's our choice. Okay, so B is just, okay, thanks.
And we would need that standard
Correct.
representation.
Well, we're
that we
always
talked
going to
about.
have that,
You're
it
always
sounds
gonna have
like.
that. But to the extent we can not only avoid any notion upon an IRS examination that you had money over here that you should have used, you shouldn't have issued that much in bonds. We got that going on, and we have making sure the county can appropriately invest the bond proceeds pending disbursement. You want to have that flexibility.
And just one more question, and then I'll come back later. But if the IRS is auditing the county's budget and they look at this comprehensively and see that actually there is no money, restricted or unrestricted, that's left over, and we're not taking advantage of a tax-exempt bond, don't they review our budget as well, that they
They're
don't?
going to look at this transaction, not the county's comprehensive budgeting. And they're going to look to see, was there other money? And if there was other money, how was that treated? If it really was part of the financing plan or not. And if you go back to what I said at the get-go, this is general obligation debt. It's not exclusively paid for by sales tax. We want to keep that separate.
And I guess this is probably an obvious answer, going with this type of bond, the general sales,
Well, that's partly legal and partly credit.
Councilwoman, it's actually a really good question. We've had a lot of discussions over the past, 5-10 years, I think, of it, and at this podium of capacity versus affordability, if you remember those discussions. The county's ability to borrow is not directly tied to its ability to afford that borrowing. So the capacity that we have, that the county has under the general obligation pledge or under the general obligation security, because it's based on two things, existing debt and new debt, and your tax base value. Tax base value just skyrocketed, 25%, a couple years ago, last year, I think, with the reval. So our capacity to issue general obligation debt increased. So it's really a capacity-driven decision and coupled with affordability. Obviously, we need to be able to afford it before we're going to issue it. But it's really capacity, and it also happenstance is this is the most widely accepted bond type in the municipal market. A general obligation bond, all else being equal, is the most secure from an investor's perspective. So hopefully this will all mean that we get the lowest possible rates for the bonds. So it's kind of a layered answer. I hope that satisfied your question. Okay.
Councilman Gallagher.
Thanks for being here. On B, maintenance and operating expenses for a county correction center or courthouse. Who put "or" in there? It's supposed to be "and courthouse." Mr. Huth?
Councilman, I think I did,
Why?
because that gives us the alternative.
What do you mean it's the alternative?
You can do one or the other, or you can do both.
This has always been both. It's never been an alternative.
still do both with
When
this
did this
language.
turn into an alternative?
You can still do both with the "or" language.
And it can also be one with that language.
If that's council's choosing.
Well, if I had "and" in there, it'd be both now, wouldn't it?
If you want to change it, I don't see a problem with it being changed.
Okay, thank you. Ma'am, are you familiar with the history of this project?
Not completely. I do know it's been
So
under
you sleep well at night?
Well, it's been under consideration for a long time.
It has, it has. And it's gone through evidently many iterations that continue to go through many iterations. And the concern that I have, and I think some of my colleagues have, if not all my colleagues, is that when this journey started for me in 2013 and commenced through 2016 up to 2020 and 2022 to where we're at today, is that we handed this administration from the previous administration a $1.4 billion project with 2 buildings. Now, whether the only question was, is the Justice Center going to be redone or remade? Do we build it new or do we try and fix what we have? And the general conclusion has been always that the cost of a redo of the Justice Center is 2.5 times the cost of building new. So it seems the reasonable thing to do would be to build new, but we kept that door open. A lot of things happened, but we did hand this administration a $1.4 billion check. Here it is. And it was clear during the campaign with the administration through the executive what he wanted to do. He wanted to take control of this, as did his opponent, which is all well and good. And this council, after many situations put before us, pulled everything, told everybody thanks, call the executive January 1st, 2023, and let's see where we go. So we left January 1st, 2023 with 2 buildings for $1.4 billion, which would probably be around $2 billion, maybe a little higher for both when we borrowed the money 3 years, 3 months ago. And now I'm hearing we're looking at almost, what, $2 billion for one building after everything's paid off? So I'm very skeptical. And I have kept my powder dry now for 3 years and 3 months. And the powder's now out. Wouldn't it have been better than best to have done this 6 years ago? 3 years ago? 2 years ago? 1 year ago? Yes, the answer is yes. And I see this before me today as nothing but a game. I've been through this before in a relatively large city. I never went through this kind of a presentation. So I called the gentleman who I consider my mentor, and I'll never be as good as him, Tom Persiak, who's probably the best financial whiz in Cuyahoga County, and I ran this scenario by him. He couldn't figure it out. And as you well know, Mr. Persiak was vice president at Fifth Third Bank. Probably wrote every loan in Strongsville's history, as long as he's been on earth. I see many problems here. You're saying over here there's no money. Are you familiar with this?
I just got a copy of it.
You just got a copy of it. So did I. And I have a column of remaining revenue. It's column C equals A minus B. And for the remaining revenue through 2027, there's nothing, because it's already been moved over to the existing 20% sales tax general fund expenses in column D, meaning since at least 2016, and I can't go further back than that, we've been putting in the general fund, we've been supplementing the general fund with excess dollars from the initial 0.25% for close to 25 or more than $25 million a year. So there is extra money. And the reason I know there's extra money is when you go through that line down there that says, oh, here's the new and improved 0.25% tax over 40 years for a jail or a justice center. No, a jail and a justice center. We're putting an average of about $25 million a year into the general fund. When I initially saw the 1/4% at 40 years, and I must admit, I wasn't going to vote for it, so I didn't participate. I didn't pay attention. I wasn't going to put that burden on my taxpayers. But I understood clearly what this council had to do. Our backs were against the wall. Something had to be done. And the two candidates for executive were insistent that it go to the voters. Well, we all know that was dead on arrival, but they were playing politics, and you know what happens when you play politics. You get an extra $1 billion. When I looked at the 1/4% over 40 years, I'm saying to myself, there's an extra billion here. What is going on? But keeping the powder dry for 3 years and 3 months, I'm like, okay, they know what they're doing. Or I pray I hope they know what they're doing. And then today I get this, as you got it. And when you multiply $25 million a year by 40 years, it comes up to $1 billion. Was that the pad? Do you see that as a $1 billion pad and there's no money over here? Or have we just charged the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County $1 billion extra to build one building when we promised 2? Can you help me?
I'm not sure I can. And the reason I say that is because our charge is to do the will of this council.
I understand your charge. You've been put in a very unenviable position. And I will remind everybody in the room, when you're at that podium, you're under oath. And if you're uncomfortable with that, I'll put you under oath. And that goes for us too. I've heard things from my colleagues sometimes that were, I don't know. Well, we don't have a speech and debate clause here like the Congress does. So my colleagues, I'll be very clear. We got to be careful what we say too. If we're going to expect the general public and those testifying in front of us to tell the truth, so should we. And I know we have to do this. Our backs are firmly against the wall. The costs have gone up exponentially. There's been no explanation for that. There's been no discussion about that. I sat on that committee for over 3 years initially. And what we had come up with was $1.4 billion for 2 buildings over 30 years. And now we're not. We're talking about 1 building. So I'm just wondering where we're at here. Do we ball this thing up and start over? Probably not the wise financial thing to do. Do we build 1 building and say to hell with the other people in the Justice Center? Probably not the wise thing to do, because in 2013, I got a tour of the Justice Center. I've been in the system for over 50-some years. The building is dead. In 2013, it was a danger. I can only imagine what it is today. And we're talking about bells and whistles, I guess. I've seen pictures of the new jail. It doesn't look like there's anything extravagant there. But what are we to do? And it falls to us. What are we to do? You got a lot of other things going on in this county. We have partners in the justice system that are very unhappy with us. I get it. And I sat with them in that committee for 3 years, and in this past 3 years and 3 months, I heard what they were saying. They were quiet. What about us? We made a promise to those people during that committee, during those committees, to keep them calm, to make sure they understand that we were in it with them. It's a team. And this tells me they're no longer on the team. So I don't know what our move's going to be. I don't know if we take off the sheriff's headquarters and keep it downtown to save money to put into a justice center that evidently now we are stuck with. We are stuck with a building that's dangerous, a building that's past its life, a building that you can't go in there and flush a toilet without running, because it's probably coming back at you. We got electricals, we got mechanicals, everything in that building has to be redone. And like I said at the beginning, when I started this rant, 2.5 times the cost just to redo that building. So I think we all in this room need to look each other in the eyes and say, maybe it's time we all get in the room together instead of threatening people and lawsuits and arguments and innuendo and he said and she said. I graduated from high school in 1975.
So did I.
Yeah, bless your heart. Where from?
Maslin Perry.
From where?
Maslin Perry.
Oh, they're good. They're good. I like them. I don't like Maslin. But I'm just wondering, the bigger discussion, this is not the big discussion today. This is not. And believe me, I appreciate the position you've been put in. And you were put in that position. You didn't fall into it. This better, best, I don't even want to hear it anymore. I know what was better, and I knew what was best. And here we are today with, I don't know what. So maybe we can get somebody from the administration up here and explain to me and everybody in Cuyahoga County how we went to 40 years for an extra $1 billion for 2 buildings, and now I got one. That's where I'll leave it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. It's nice seeing you.
Nice to see
Nice
you.
seeing me too. Thank you. I'm just going to, because you have 3 points, we're on point 1, right? I'm going to try to stay focused
He
on.
had 3 points.
No, that's what I'm trying to get it back to where you started the presentation. She came up to talk about the federal tax. Then we're going to go to point number 2, the bond rating, and point number 3, the protecting. Try to ask questions on each one of those and then open the floor up to ask any questions to our bond counsel. Would that be accurate? Because I'll keep my points to this and then, or it's a free-for-all now.
I might see if we could finish this one and then do the 2 and 3 in a single shot to give us a shot at making some progress.
Thank you. Just I have 2 questions on the federal tax. When you say define scrutiny, or who we're going to bring the attention to, and that's one portion, and then I have a question follow-up with that. Who's going to scrutinize this?
The IRS
At the federal level or the
at
state
the federal level.
Okay. And then, as our bond counsel, your ability to defend it, we would not be passing something that you don't believe
Oh, no.
would uphold
No,
the
we would
scrutiny.
have the standard representation at a minimum.
Yeah.
Crystal clear if we have D, but we can still give an unqualified opinion if we have the standard representation that there were no replacement proceeds or plans for pledging.
Yeah, I just want to be, it sounds like you're saying, oh my God, it might be a trouble, but either one is going to pass an
Either one.
IRS scrutinized bond issuance.
With all due respect to Mr. Gallagher, better, best.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry. When I first heard it, I'm thinking through the chair, oh my God, scrutinized might, when you scrutinize something, it may turn bad.
It could.
Because it's a negative word. So I'm scrutinizing, I'm looking for something, but we're good because we have great bond counsel and better or best, but not going to be dinged.
Shouldn't.
Shouldn't.
I mean, if I could predict, I wouldn't be here. But I will tell you, in our experience recently, you hate to say it this way, but they sometimes are fishing.
And through the chair, if they find something, what would that mean?
Well, they would suggest the death knell, which is to declare your bonds taxable, which means everybody who owns them is going to sue you. But then they usually suggest, oh, if you pay us, we'll go away.
And us is Cuyahoga County, through the chair.
Cuyahoga paying the IRS.
Yeah.
It's voluntary. A voluntary payment will go away. That's how it works.
Not as clear as I'd like it to be.
No, it's not, but if we do better with the standard rep, we will strongly suggest, this is a situation where you're not even going to have these sales tax proceeds until 27, 28.
Yeah.
How could you say it was a pledge?
Yeah, I don't,
Hadn't even started.
I'm getting lost here, but it's scrutinized, and the outcome of scrutinized is a death penalty, meaning they're taxable, and that's not good. And the other one is some kind of negotiated settlement, and after the negotiated settlement,
They go
what we
away.
did is all good.
And we like to think that we don't even go that far. What you did was all good. We
Yeah.
gave an unqualified opinion. We got the representation from you. This fund was not pledged. These were general obligation bonds.
And through the chair, just to end this particular moment, it is very, 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 very unlikely that we're going to have any of that happen because of your expertise. Would that be,
I think that's
it's a
fair.
comfortable statement? Okay. That's it on the tax, and I look forward to answer some questions on the other two.
Councilman Castleberry.
Thank you, Mr. President. One quick question. I just need a clarification when you said a voluntary payment. And we're hoping that there's no circumstance we get to that. But what are you talking of voluntary? Is it a percentage of the
depends.
sales or what?
It depends. It depends on how abusive they think you were. And if I had to guess, they're going to look at yield restriction on that fund.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
And Hauser, and then I have a follow-up.
yes, proceed.
Wouldn't it be beyond better and beyond best is if you had a project for, let's call it 2.2 billion here, and you're going to get 2 buildings or whatever you're going to get out of it, and you have dedicated the sales tax money to paying that off. What is the downside of that?
If you had that as a pledge, then the IRS would say, oh, you can't reinvest that money pending use.
We're not going to have any money left.
Two different things. Project fund, sales tax fund.
Okay,
Project fund, you're spending as you build and
Right.
so forth.
right.
If you have a pledge, the IRS would say, oh, ho, ho, you really didn't need to borrow all that money, tax exempt. You had this money over here. This money over here is part of your deal.
Actually, we don't.
Well, you won't until 27, 28.
Well, we borrowed 75 million to bridge the 26, 27 years. What's the IRS going to say about that?
That's a different issue. It's, was the sales tax formally pledged?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have Councilwoman Simon, and after that, I would like to allow our presenters to finish their presentation, after which time anybody can ask any questions about any aspects, including more about this particular point if they want to.
So just,
Councilwoman Simon.
thank you. Just letter D is important to alleviate federal tax concerns related to yield restriction. But if we have that standard representation that there's no replacement proceeds, we don't need to.
You don't need
We
D.
don't need D. And then further C, you said we don't need either. To address the yield restriction, we don't need C.
C would be nice to have, but it's kind of like the bridal shower, nice to have, but
Don't
it's
need.
not a skillet.
Okay, but this B definitely gives us that, what we need to show it's not pledged. Yes? Yes? Answer.
Yes. Sorry.
I'm
nodding.
used to- Thank you.
Okay. Please continue with your presentation.
Okay, so we've touched upon this quite a bit. This speaks to how we're going to sell the bonds as general obligation bonds, with no pledge. And the desire and the objective of this is to really get to the heart of the budget flexibility question and telling the rating analysts that, hey, we have this in place and we have the budget flexibility measurements in place. So we're walking into those discussions with the best possible position that we possibly can. Given the magnitude of the bond issue that we're looking at, I think it's in all of our interests and the county's interest to get the best deal possible. I've told some of you in discussions leading up to this, and I promised I would say it publicly, and I'll say it all day long publicly. I can't tell you that if we do this, we won't get downgraded, or that there's no rating down pressure on us. I can't tell you vice versa that if we do it, that if we don't do it, we won't get downgraded. I can't say that because it's not my opinion that matters at the end of the day for the rating analysts. It's their opinion. So what my objective here is to put the county in the best possible position to get the best possible rating so our interest rates are the lowest, more money flows to the county at the end of the day. That's the objective of that. And then item 3 here, wanted to make it abundantly clear that, we have sold bonds to investors in the past as sales tax revenue bonds, which is pledged. And we want to make it abundantly clear that we are not attempting or have a perception to intend to alter their security and their investments. I just want, if there's a belt and suspenders here, it's this one, I think, just making sure, since we are extending the sales tax to pay for it, want to make sure that we're not being very clear that we are not impairing any agreements that we've already entered into with investors on prior issues. So that's my 2 cents on that one. And that's it, and open it up for questions.
Okay, we're up for any questions on any and all aspects. Okay, Councilman Hauser.
Sure, through the chairs. So I guess my question is, if the bonds are determined by certainty, us making the bonds more flexible, wouldn't that hurt our ratings over help it in the future?
That if the flexibility is.
Yeah, the flexibility, if the bond market is determined by certainty of the bonds, then if we change the language and make these funds more discretionary, would that not hurt us in the long term as far as our bond rating?
So it's an interesting question because what the rating analysts look at isn't just the 0.25%. Will you pay the debt?
Okay.
Well, if that's the case, all municipal bonds ever issued should be AAA, the highest rating possible, because default rates on municipal bonds are, don't quote me on it, but under 0.5% probably. So it very rarely does a municipal bond ever default. So what they look at, especially on general obligation bond issues, is the wealth metrics of your tax base. They look at financial performance, liquidity levels. They look at debt metrics. They look at the management strength, the budgeting practices, budget flexibility to alter your budget as economic conditions change. So that's what they're looking at. So my position on this is if we can have that flexibility going into the rating discussions, I think that helps our chance of not getting downgraded or limiting that pressure. Did that help?
So the flexibility is actually in letter B that we need, correct? We have letter B that gives us the flexibility to address Councilman Hauser's question. Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry,
looking
I'm
at-
nodding my head. I
Okay.
just realized.
I know
what
I'm
was
used to being in depositions where the, okay. So we already have the flexibility in B, so I understand it. Go ahead. Were you done? Go ahead.
And just my last question, and so it looks like we're negative on the new sheet we have until 2036. So I guess my final question is, once we have this flexibility, what guardrails are in place that we don't put ourselves in the same position long-term again?
Well, I think the, Councilman, it's a great question. I think that comes to the, budgeting practices going forward and looking at this, funds separately when you're budgeting going forward as opposed to all one. So I think this will fundamentally change how the county budgets, I think. Walter? He's nodding yes. So I think there's a bit of a different approach to that to make it more transparent to what will be expended out of that restricted or the capital account versus non. So I think it'll be fairly transparent for the council to see the money going in, the money coming out.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to follow up on the question of flexibility. As I understand it, the problem is related to the fact that we currently use a significant portion of the 0.25% sales tax for ongoing operations. And so that if we left the language in place, we would have a significant portion of our current operations that we wouldn't have money to pay for because that general fund money would not be available from the 0.25% sales tax. And that would raise questions about the flexibility of and stability of our overall operations as opposed to this particular issuance itself. And that would be of concern to the rating agencies potentially. Is that an accurate characterization?
I believe that is an accurate representation.
Regarding Section D, am I correct that doesn't do anything more than state powers that the council already has because this language about the Safety Facilities Fund, it's not charter language. The council can amend it any time it wants, and so Section D doesn't really say anything other than what already exists. It just makes it clear explicitly and gives some assurance. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. So what I'm hearing is that with flexibility, we get a better bond rating. That's what you're saying?
Councilman, I think it's more, all else equal, I believe so, yes. Can I guarantee it? No. I wish it was a binary response. I wish there was a good yes or no question that I could answer because there's a lot of gray in these questions, and this is how it works because it allows you a lot of flexibility to adjust your policies, your procedures as a county government to what you need to do. So I think, if we do this, will there be less pressure in our discussions with the rating agencies for any downward movement? That's my opinion. That's my professional opinion. Yes, there's less pressure on our rating.
So a little more flexibility with some caveats and gray areas. Okay. But on the other side, what I think I just heard was that we have operating, now this is for capital, but what I also heard was we have operating dollars through our 0.25% that are about to run out. We have operating that's coming from the 0.25%. When does it run out? Another year or two, or if I heard that correctly? Or the funding source ends of the 0.25% in a matter of time.
So the 0.25% is a general fund 0.25% sales tax goes into the general fund. The legislation that directs it to only capital begins in 2028. So at the end of '27, that's when it would,
27, 28, the operating dollars as they're currently set up will end.
the funding stream.
Funding
would
stream
end.
ends. So is that what we're hearing in, what is that, in about another 2 years,
Yeah, 18 months.
18 months?
A little over.
So if,
20 months.
if the operating ends, how much is that in actual dollars?
Well, did $25.8 million.
$25.8 million. So in about 18 months, $25 million is going to, funding stream is going to end, and we're gonna have to figure out how to come up with 25 million.
Which item B does that. That's the operating flexibility, the flexible
So
budgeting.
over here, if we change and give more flexibility, then we have options to head off a coming crisis of $25 million shortfall, potentially.
Potentially.
So kind of getting it. Okay. Started off by just saying it. Now I'm trying to process that. $25 million in about 18 months operating, and we've got our 0.25% for capital, which by the papers, looks like we don't even have a lot of capital to deal with the two buildings Gallagher was just talking about, or. That's the problem. Yes, no.
Yeah, that's,
I'm sorry, Mr. President, what's the problem?
I think what I'm hearing, because this is high finances, I'm not going.
Well, can you, you just said yes, Mr. Franz, to his statement that there's a problem. Can you restate the problem? Because I need to
I'll say
understand.
it as I thought it is.
What do you think?
my understanding was if it stays the way it is, we have a $25 million problem.
$25 million problem for the general fund?
Yes.
Okay.
So that was my response. I apologize if I misunderstood
No, that was it.
the question.
I think you
Okay.
said in 18 months, $25 million is going to be needed for operating costs. We have a capital fund right now that we're dealing with that's not as flexible. And what I'm hearing is we're asking for flexibility, knowing that in 18 months, we're going to have to have a $25 million. And that's what I'm saying. Correct me if I'm wrong, because that's what I was hearing.
Mr. Chair, to Councilman Jones, the flexibility is relative to two things. One, whether we have flexibility within the fund we set up to add letter B, which gives us the ability to not only fund the capital, but also to have maintenance and operations. So that's a flexibility issue, as bond counsel explained, that she and Bricker think is necessary for the best or better language. So flexibility they do want, and we have it in B. That's B in here, the new language, B, operation maintenance of the Justice Center, the court, and/or the jail. You're talking about a separate issue, which is whether we want to use council, this money, to cover our general fund potential budget deficit going forward in 2028. So that's a different flexibility question. And that is the question, if I may, Mr. President, the council's consideration, which I hope we're not going to have a determination today because this is a pretty big issue, how we proceed and how are we going to fill the budgetary potential deficit for the county's budget, but also how are we going to handle the, constructing not only a jail, but a court as well. And that's all I wanted to clarify. The flexibility is relative to two different issues, and they're competing in some respect.
So I would not totally agree with that. They are two different things, but they're closely related because the things that are in Section B, which are operating and maintenance expenses related to the jail and the Justice Center, these are expenses that can and are paid for out of the general fund. So, so by creating this, this flexibility in item B, it would enable us to resolve the general fund problem. So they are a little bit different, but they are very, very closely related. Other questions and comments? Councilman Kelly, followed by Schlepper.
Thank you, Mr. President. So when I introduced 2024-4, and that was co-sponsored by 3 of my colleagues and passed 8-3 by this council, was putting the guardrails around that 0.25% sales tax extension. It can only be used for a specific purpose, which was solely for the costs of the capital projects related to our correction center and courthouse. We heard today from the county's financial advisor that he cannot guarantee that the county's credit rating won't be downgraded even if we were to amend this legislation. I believe we should adhere to the original intent of the ordinance and the parameters that were put in place. The reason the guardrails were put there was not to supplement the general fund. The reason the guardrails were put there was to make sure that the jail and the courthouse were built and taken care of. So if this comes to a vote, I would encourage my colleagues not to vote for this ordinance. Thank you.
Councilman Schlepper, then Sweeney.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just had a couple, I guess, more basic questions. How is the maintenance and operation of the current jail and justice center funded currently? Do we know the answer to that, or does anybody here today know the answer to that?
Yeah, it's the,
How are we currently funding the jail, our current jail and justice center?
That's the-
Operationally, maintenance, and so on?
yeah, it's the, Councilman, that's the general fund.
Through the general fund, okay. So my next question then is, as you mentioned, Mr. Franz, our tax base value in the county has increased, did you say 25%? Was that correct?
Don't quote me.
Real estate?
But it's pretty
Give or
close.
take?
Yeah, the assessed value, yeah.
Okay, so I feel like that alone should lend itself to our obligation to pay the debt. Those dollars go into the general fund, is that correct?
Not all. So it's a complicated web when it comes to property taxes.
Right.
And some of the property tax reform legislation that was signed by the governor on December 19th of 2025, talk about guardrails. It puts an inflationary cap on any local government that receives an allocation of inside millage. And as you probably know, any piece of dirt in Ohio has a minimum of 3 subdivisions on it, right? Township, school district, and a county. There is now a GDP deflator that has not yet been released that will cap you in terms of inflationary growth on your inside millage. And then going forward in triennial update years and sexennial reappraisal years, that cap will be recalculated. And this is all coming from the state. This is nothing that your fiscal officer, your fiscal officer's on the receiving end. And how this is all going to play out, it is designed to limit your revenue growth on inside millage. Even though you have this large increase in appraised value, you're not going to get to benefit from that 100%. And, you know, specifically to the county, I don't know because I don't know all your numbers. I don't know your inside millage allocation and all of that, but just know that unvoted share of the 10 mills that's levied year in, year out for your general fund is not going to have the spikes that would accompany 25% increase.
All right, this is making me think of my school board days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm pretty familiar with this. But at the end of the day, the general fund is receiving more because of the increased taxable value of our properties throughout
You're-
the county.
Receiving more, but up to a cap, and every taxing authority is going to have to declare, and nobody figures out what this is going to look like, if you're getting more revenue than you got last year, whether or not you are going to take it. It's a different world.
Yeah, I was just trying to differentiate between, whether or not we're getting more dollars and if that lends itself to, from a, credit rating perspective or a bond issuance perspective, whether or not they're going to look at, well, you're getting more taxable dollars in your general fund that lends itself to your ability to repay regardless of a cap.
Right, and there is going to be what I call the no man's land.
Right.
More than last year, but under the cap.
Devil's in the details. Thank you.
So just an FYI that property tax only provides 3 or 4% of the general fund. The lion's share of the property tax that the county receives goes to the HHS levy fund. Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome again. Who do you work for?
Him or me?
No, I mean, with this particular discussion we're having, you were hired by, and who do you work for?
I'm employed by Stiefel, but I work
this.
for Cuyahoga County.
Yes, and just to get some of the chatter out right now, as a lawyer, sometimes hired by a client to try to get to end game. You, as an expert in the bonds, you just advise, you're not doing the, taking direction from either us or the administration.
No, I
You're
will
just
give-
reporting the facts.
I report the facts. I present my opinion, whether, I always joke, whether people like it or not, you're getting what I believe, because I have a duty by statute. I have a fiduciary duty to my clients as a municipal advisor. So you're getting the same advice that I'm giving to the administration. They're getting the same advice I'm giving. I don't differ.
If we were to direct you, or the administration were to direct you, you'd say, thank you, but no, this is my opinion.
Yeah, they may not like it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clear the air.
Likewise,
'cause
you may not like what I'm saying.
There's
but
discussion
it's-
all over the place. I'm just trying to get that one
Okay.
identified as what you wanted to share with us. Through the chair, going back to the sales tax was created by the county commissioners and was voted on by Hagan and Demora. There was original legislation or original contract. Do we know what those words said and what they were identified for? And then it was amended by the previous administration. And what does that say in regards to, it was for capital, it was for buildings, it was for general fund? Do we know that?
I will defer to Greg Huth or Rick Maniloff, but I do believe this, because we went through a lot of iterations and making sure that we're doing this the right way. I'm fairly confident in saying it's a general fund tax, not a.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at when it was first, because it was for the convention center, it was for the
Right.
hotel and
It
stuff
was to
like
supplement
that.
the general fund at the time, in 2007, yes.
But in the original,
Yes, 2007. yes,
Okay.
yeah.
the language said it is tax, 25% that goes to the general fund,
0.25%, yes.
0.25.
Yeah.
So you're, okay.
Yeah.
And then when the previous administration amended it, did it continue to say that? It was amended. When you amend something, you change it.
In 2024, it was just that, we just extended it. We didn't change the purpose.
It
of
is
the
my
money.
understanding under Armand that it was
It was 24
amended.
It was 2024? 2023. It was extended. We didn't change the purpose wasn't changed at the time. I mean, I can direct the legislation.
Yeah, and through the chair, I'm doing my due diligence. I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand a lot of moving parts. And it was my understanding 2007 was created, it was amended under the previous administration, and I'm trying to garner if it was ever not general obligation bonds. If it was originally for the Hilton,
It was always general fund.
okay. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, since I'm here, I want to make a correction on the record here. The current version of the code, since we had this and/or discussion, does say courthouse, or a correction center or courthouse. That's what your law says right now. So when I used "or" in that paragraph B, it was just duplicating that language.
Through the chair, thank you, Greg, for that clarification, doing the extra work. Through the chair, just my own simple logic. And when you're bonding something, right, for capital, we know what that is. We want to take $1 billion and put it towards this particular capital project, and that's what we're going to use the dollars for. Compared to, we're going to put it in the general fund and commit to using them to build this building. If it's there, it has to be used for it. If it's in the general fund, there's other options. And in a scenario that will never happen under this leadership in the administration here, they couldn't spend, they might not even spend a penny on it. And that building may never get built. So I'm just trying to say, with risk, that's all I'm trying to get.
And I want to make sure I'm following with the bond proceeds.
Yeah.
Those are committed to bricks and sticks and everything for the project.
Okay,
Bond proceeds cannot go to the general fund under state law.
got it. And this is all the extra money that we anticipate coming.
That's a different, you've got bond proceeds, and then you've got sales tax receipts. Those are different things.
Yeah, Councilman, so think about this, but we're going to issue bonds.
Got
We're
it?
going to get a bunch of money, put it into an account. That's going to be used to pay the invoices and the construction invoices.
Got it.
Meanwhile, sales taxes will come into the general fund. The general fund will make contributions to the debt service to pay the debt service for those bonds.
And then any other money that's left over could be used to pay further on it, or could be used to,
Any general fund expense that the county council determines.
got it. As an example, when there's capital needs currently, like the Veterans Building and the Board of Elections, we use some of our general fund to pay those capitals. That's just an example of how it could be used that way,
So, yeah.
but it has to be passed by council to be authorized it. And just through the chair, with the Justice Center, because I was on the Cleveland side for a while, what's Cleveland's role in this? Does that have a bearing on the bonding capability because of the 1/3, or they're leasing it from us? Does that have anything to do it in regards to understanding the stability? In regards to them looking at everything, right? They're looking at everything, and the current status of the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County's partnership, does that play a role in these bonds?
Councilman, if I'm understanding correctly, I do not believe it plays a significant role in the bonds because it's either not paying the debt service or it's not, if there's arrangements between the city and the county, then bond rating agencies are, just as long as it's not a material issue to the detriment.
Yeah, because I'm just relating it to, through the chair, when you're saying the $25 million that if we don't have stability in the county, right, it's going to be a negative impact. No stability over in regards to the relationship, because it's an unclosed relationship in regards to the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, because they're still negotiating, do we have 1/3 ownership? Do we lease in this portion of it? So when the bond agency's looking at it, they're like, that's a loose end. Does that need to be tightened up to make it as good as it can be? And you're saying it's a very small point.
It's never come up in the past, is the way I would answer that.
Yeah, but
And honestly, I don't know enough about that, the relationship between the city and the county to that detail and how those arrangements are structured, so
So it probably won't go to that detail. Okay. And one last one. They say council controls the purse strings. And with this fund, when the dollars are going in and it goes in the general fund, this might be an administration question, is can we have a sub-fund that says jail and courthouse that comes, the money goes into there, but it's a subset of the general fund, and every time council comes, or the administration comes to council, we know it's being taken out of those dollars instead of mixed in.
I'd ask Walter, the budget
I'm just
director,
trying
to respond to make sure I don't speak out of turn on that.
Walter Parfialowitz from the Budget Office.
Hi, Walter.
Hi, Councilman, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I believe what you're asking, can we segregate this somehow within the general fund? We currently have what's considered a 0.25% sales tax fund that's currently not being used. We look at sales tax all-inclusive. We don't break it apart between the permissive and the additional. But at one point in time, well before my time, it was actually broken out. We could go back to that.
Okay, through the chair, just trying to, because this is a sensitive subject. The courthouse is a high priority that's been kicked down the road and down the road. And I'd like to know if the dollars that were committed to the 25 or 0.25% is coming from there, because when we make our decision, we'll be making our decision saying, yes, we're taking it out of there and putting it here instead of just having it all rolled up in the general fund enough not knowing about it. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as it goes, but I do appreciate your clarifying. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you. This question is to Bob France, and you indicated that in response to Councilman Sweeney's question about whether this was only your opinion, but when we talked, you said you've been having conversations with the administration for months and months, and that the administration was seeking a way to have more flexibility versus how this was already passed in this ordinance. Did I not understand that?
No, yeah, that's accurate.
That the administration was telling you, suggesting to you that they need more flexibility for their purpose, right?
Well, Councilman, this goes all the way back to before the fund was created originally.
Right.
And, we suggested, I think the administration suggested at the time, to have operating expenses and operating expenses included as a permissible use of the fund. So it's not new.
And then this went further. Yep. I understand that we talked about operating and maintenance even when we passed this. So I just wanted to get clarity on that. Now, back to Council President's question about whether that when you go to the bond market, the rating consideration would include whether the general fund subsidy will continue on as it is now with right, they're going to look at going in 28, whether the sales tax proceeds will continue or not continue to subsidize the general fund. And that you answered, yes, that would impact the bond rating if the general fund did not have the subsidy.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Would it also be a consideration of the bond rating committee, whether by keeping letter D in or letter C in would perhaps hypothetically result in the court coming in with a mandamus action or a legal action to enjoin funds or to make sure that the sales tax proceeds were protected in a guardrailed fund? Would that impact the credit rating discussion if that were to occur? Just as you said, if the general fund subsidy would not continue because of the fund guardrails, would it not also be true that if the guardrails are removed and the court initiated an action or any third party that might impact our finances, wouldn't that as well be in consideration for the bond rating assessment?
It could very well impact.
It could.
It could.
Either way, if we remove the guardrails and there's a repercussion from an action, legal action, or if we don't remove the guardrails. So we're looking at a subjective potential future of what may or may not occur. You don't know, but either scenario might impact the underlying bond rate.
Councilwoman, yes. I believe so.
Yes, okay. And I'm looking at your slide that says, when bond number 2, which we're on, bond rating concerns, you have a paragraph that says limiting, restricting funds for only capital restricts the county's ability to adapt to changing budget environments and thus places stress on operations and credit ratings. You remember that's in your slide, right?
Correct.
And you understand that I asked you previously what you meant by the county, and you understood the county to be other than council, right? Because council always has the ability to change with the environment and change their budget and ordinances that restrict funds. Because you said the county is hamstrung.
When I say the county, I mean the county in total, whether that's
Administration.
an administration function or a council function.
But you know that the council always has the ability to adapt to changing budget environments, and this council always has the ability to address stress on operations and credit ratings, right? We always have that ability.
Absolutely you do.
So going to
Absolutely.
council president's point, if council already has that ability, thus, from a bond rating perspective, not the tax shield restriction question, but from this, we already have that ability. So why is this language necessary?
I think it's necessary because when we go to have this discussion, I think it's helpful to have be included so that we can say we have the ability, not if things happen, we hope to have the ability.
But we always have the ability.
Right.
So why
I
don't you
agree.
just say that?
The council always has the ability.
Yeah,
There's
so
no
you don't
question.
need that in writing. Just bring the charter. Why don't you bring the county charter when you go to buy or sell these bonds then? I mean, if you need something in writing saying that we need that type of flexibility, we have it. You don't need it here. We talked about it. You said we don't need it here.
Right.
You changing your position that we do need D now?
No. I'm
You
not.
don't need D.
Are we talking, excuse me, Councilwoman, are we talking about B, C, or D, or all of them?
I'm talking right now about D, not from your perspective. I already have understood your perspective.
From a bond rating perspective, I think we don't need, just as long as we have B, A, and B, so the debt service is
Okay.
paid, and then
Thank you.
I think we have that.
That's
Is that-
it. That was my question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, now, because your position is you don't know whether keeping C and D would material impact anything, right? So okay, you answered the question. That was my question. We don't need C and D from your perspective of going to the bond market.
Correct, yes, I believe that that's correct.
Okay. And from both of you, I think this has already been stated, and it's understood that C and D, either keeping those in or actually taking them out would not be a condition to defeat the purchasing of the bonds. So we don't need those to go to the market, C and D.
We don't need them to be able to give an unqualified opinion, assuming the standard representation
Yeah.
and the tax compliance.
Which we're going to have. Okay, that's it. Thank you for now. Thanks, Bob.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up. Is it still your opinion, knowing that particularly in the current environment that how the IRS responds to anything is very much up in question, that including C and D provides a larger margin of safety and would put us in a best position rather than a better position? Is that still your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. Councilman Castleberry.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate the time that we spent speaking yesterday, Bob. One thing, I wasn't here shortly before I started this, council passed this extension to take place, which was a bold move, seeing that we needed 2 buildings. And one thing that really struck to me, Councilman Gallagher alluded to, it feels like we're leaving one group out to dry, almost abandoning our partner. I think those conversations need to continue. But all of us, I think with a basic understanding of running a household, doing that, can understand, credit ratings, debt service, you want to have that ability. And this was kind of presented to me as, hey, this is going to definitely lower our, not by you, just, this is kind of the way it was I first heard this. And I said, and who wouldn't think, hey, our credit rating's lower, borrowing's lower, you got to explore this. But right now we're hearing, and this is no disrespect to your financial expertise, but we're hearing a lot of what ifs, and this can happen and that can happen. And we're being asked to change a pledge that was made of this 0.25% tax on a lot of what ifs. And then I still feel like we're leaving one group out. So I think it's really important that, we have to think long and hard about this. And really, I need some assurances on some of these things. And that personally, just because it's tough to make that decision based on this could happen. And I think we need to really, try to nail this down, which may be impossible, but I'm really struggling with that as far as, this may happen or this could happen. And that's really a sticking point for me. But thank you for your presentation.
Councilman Jones?
Thank you. Okay. So, coming back to the 18 months, 25 million, something keeps in my mind keeps saying, if with greater flexibility, not only would we begin to, be able to borrow at a lower rate, all those things, but it would allow the administration to use these dollars not only for capital, but for potentially operational. Right? Is that how
Correct, yes.
Correct, okay. So that, because again, in all this, what I'm really hearing is an opportunity, and maybe rightfully so, I'm not even saying it's not right, to be able to address this oncoming $25 million shortfall in 18 months of operations. The challenge is we need to build a jail, a court, and deal with $25 million in 18 months that's going to come due for operational. And now, with having said that, this isn't a question to you. It's really, I guess, the administration. I don't know if Eric is still here in the room, but I just want to talk about that for a moment. Let's say everything works out, and you have the flexibility. Are you able to tell us what the big picture game plan is for the administration to deal with a jail, a court, and a $25 million shortfall in 18 months? What's the game plan? Is this part of a tool to help the administration to deal with literally what seemed like an almost impossible situation we're in?
I appreciate the question, Councilmember. Let me say a couple things. First of all, as all of you know, or those of you that were here know, the administration opposed the legislation that restricted this 0.25%. This county has a history of having spent money from this 0.25% beyond the debt issuance for the hotel and for the convention center. It goes back, we have numbers back to 2018. This is not something that this administration created. There has been uses and dollars spent from this 0.25% for operations that go back well before this administration. So that's the first thing. Second thing I would say is that we recognize that although we were able, with your approval, to pass a budget in December, that dollars were tight, and that absent the ability to try to figure out how to continue to cut costs and see if there are opportunities either to raise revenues or hopefully revenues outperform what we estimated, that we were going to have an issue in 2028 and 2029. We're not hiding that. That's true. The reason that we are bringing this forward now, and I mentioned this to Councilmember Simon when we talked individually, the reason this is coming forward now and not in the deliberation of a budget discussion is because we got subject matter advice from our subject matter experts that this action gives us the best chance to borrow money at the lowest cost, and it also gives us the best chance to be able to capture accrued interest. So that's why this is forward now. It does provide there is additional flexibility here, because if you unrestrict and it is just a general obligation of the county, once the bonds are issued, the money can be used for operations. We continue to try to manage the budget as best we can, and ultimately, we have to come before you and justify it. You all do make the final decision on what our budget looks like in 2 years. So all I can say is we recognize this is an issue. We opposed the legislation when it initially came up for that reason. We continue to try to do the best we can to manage a budget during very tight budget times with revenue uncertainty and costs going up. And we've had a hiring freeze since last summer, early fall. That hiring freeze remains in place even though we passed a balanced budget on the general fund side in December. We continue to try to do our best to manage costs. But yes, there might need to be a discussion with council if we are not either successful in continuing to trim costs or we don't see revenues outperform estimates about the need to fill that hole for 27, 28, I beg your pardon, for 28, 29, or collectively make some tough decisions. We recognize that. But I want to make it clear that this money, this pattern of spending money from this 0.25%, it did not start with this administration.
So it's not a lot of money in the end, even if all of this works out and we have flexibility, it's still not a lot, right? Is there a game plan, or is it for how to ultimately address everything? The court, the jail, where?
As a council member in response, sometimes I mention to my team when we're tackling large problems, we need to take things in digestible chunks. And what I recognize right now is that we have to get a jail built. We're looking at trying to issue bonds in June in order to build a jail. That's what's in front of us now. That's what we're trying to figure out. Contrary to speculation and some other comments, this administration has not foregone the idea of trying to either build a new courthouse or rebuild. We haven't yet figured that out, but we continue to work on it. We had a conversation just yesterday. My team did. I wasn't there. My team had a conversation just yesterday with representatives from the courts to try to talk through, and we hope to meet with them again this week, to try to talk through any concerns they might have related to the current Justice Center. So we're all trying to do this above board. Do I yet know the final solution? No, we continue to work at it.
Okay, so I think I hear it now. So it's this flexibility from bond council's perspective, actually helps us to save money, but also from the county side, this looming 25 million, this could be a tool to help offset whatever the ultimate plan will be. Could be a tool toward that as well.
My hope would be, in response to you, council member, my hope would be that once we have the bond issuance and get going on the jail construction and work towards opening that we can continue to have conversations to try to figure out how best to do a courthouse. And that we minimize any additional use so that we have dollars to do the courthouse in the future. We continue to work on that every day.
Okay. Thank you.
On that point?
So, no, hold on a minute. The sentiment I'm hearing is that people need to spend more time on this. I would like to hold some time so that we can hear the initial presentation about the bond sale itself. So I would ask, unless has something that they really need to ask today, if we could hold it over till the next time.
I'll may I say something?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I will hold my questions on this particular point of personal privilege, not personal, but my point that I was going to bring up. But there are interested parties here. You can let them talk?
It would be the same thing unless someone says that they absolutely have to talk today. I would like to reserve some time so that we can hear the initial presentation.
Thank you very much. So you are saying that in the future, interested parties will be more than happy, or are going to be part of the process of doing our due diligence in regards to understanding and doing all our work to put us in best position to know everything before we make this important
Yes,
decision.
that's always our process.
Always.
Yes.
Well, I love it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about schedule, that next Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we're gonna have committee of the whole and continue this and the bond legislation. Councilman Gallagher has graciously consented to merge the Public Safety Committee with this, and we will also hear one additional piece of public safety legislation. I would ask that if anybody has proposed amendments to this legislation, if they could please send them to me by the end of business on Friday, so that we go into next Tuesday's meeting and everybody can know what amendments are up for consideration. And I would like to thank you very much for your assistance and expert knowledge in this matter. And we will now continue on to the overview presentation on the bond issuance. And just so that everybody knows, this legislation hasn't even been introduced yet. It'll be introduced at tonight's council meeting. So obviously, we won't be voting on anything, but we want to give an opportunity for it to be presented and for people to get questions out on the table. Please proceed.
I'll remain, but I yield to Mr. France, and thank you all for your service to this community. It's evident you really care.
Thank you.
All right. Still here. Bob Franz, Managing Director at Stiefel, Financial Advisor, Municipal Advisor to the county. Just wanted to provide a brief couple of slides on the bond resolution, the bond parameters, what we're doing, what we're talking about here. We've gone over this a lot in previous iterations of these presentations at this podium in this council chamber. The 0.25% implemented in 2007, expires in 27, extended in 23 for another 40 years, as we've talked about. Currently funds debt obligations for the convention center, the Hilton Hotel, and a small amount for the Cavs. All those debt obligations end in 2027 with the expiration of the tax. The other portion that we've discussed a decent amount here is the general fund operation. So for the jail project itself, back in May of 25, this council approved the sale of $41.5 million of notes. And notes are a fancy word of just saying short-term debt, can't exceed 1 year. So we did a 1-year note, bond anticipation note. You issue the notes in anticipation of the bonds. That's what we did. The plan was to have those notes be taken out with the long-term bond issue. So here we are. So we sold those notes in May, and they come due on June 4th, and that's a key phrase, or a key date, I'm sorry. So we have $41.5 million of principal coming due, plus $1,076,000 in change in interest. So just kind of rounding it there. So we do have a decent chunk of change coming due on June 4th. Apologize. So what we need to fund. So I wanted to break the discussion into what we need to fund and then how we fund it. I thought that was a pretty easy structure to have this conversation. So what we need to fund is a project estimated at $910 million. We already funded 41.5 of the bonds, so the rest is just the remaining project need. We have note interest due of $1,758,000, so that's that rounded number for the note due. The other portion is the capitalized interest of $72 million, $1.78 million. So what that does is that's the interest due to investors between when we issue the debt in June and when the 0.25% becomes available in the beginning of 2028. So we borrow that money to pay the investors back. In previous iterations of this project and discussions, that was much longer and was always there. It's just now here it is. So we add all those numbers up and we get to $984,358,000. When we issue bonds in the municipal market, it's in increments of 5,000. So we rounded that up to the nearest 5,000. That's about as scientific as it gets on that. And that's how we get to $984,540,000. Working with Public Works and Bond Counsel, Becky and her colleagues, to determine how long the term can be, the maximum term on this bond issue could be. Like we've talked about before, counties can issue bonds up to 40 years based on what you're financed. So if it's a lot of furniture and fixtures and equipment with short average lives, that comes down off of 40 years. So we start at 40, add in the components of what you're doing. Based on the average life of all the different components that are in the project, we're looking at 38 years. So looking at a 38-year term of December 1, 2064 as the final maturity. And like we've talked about, these bonds will be general obligation bonds of Cuyahoga County with the full faith and credit backing the issue. Apologize, hitting that button again. So this is my best attempt to summarize what is in front of you, because it's really difficult to put up all those numbers on a screen. I'm not trying to short shrift anything. I'm not trying to hide anything for presentation's sake. This is my best attempt to summarize what you're looking at. So what I did here is kind of group the different years and the different areas into different years. So the first one is 2026 and 2027. That's the capitalized interest period. So $72 million going out to investors. We're borrowing that to pay them back so we can get the project done today, get the GMP signed, get all the contracts signed to get the project going. The second period of time here is from 2028 to 2034, should be looking down here, to 2034. What we're attempting to do here is slowly ramp up and incrementally ramp up debt service on the bonds to allow for our assumptions on the sales tax, to allow the debt to be layered in, as opposed to coming straight out of the gate with like $60 million due, boom. So it allows us a little bit of flexibility to make sure our assumptions are right and to build it in incrementally without jeopardizing the integrity of the general fund. Then beginning in 2035 through the term, level debt service. About the same principal amount about the same annual payment, principal and interest every year. So we're looking at about $61 million a year in debt service needs from 2035 to 2064. The bond term of 38 years, that is the maximum we can go. It's a balancing act when you're talking about bond term, just like with a home mortgage. If you think about it that way, just trying to bring it down a level. If you look at a 30-year mortgage versus a 15, you're paying less monthly in your 30-year than a 15, but overall, you're going to pay more. So it's an affordability balancing act, and that's what we're trying to do here. And looking at 38 years, it's the maximum affordability that we can get to on an annual basis, and spread the cost out over the useful life of the project. That's essentially that's what we're trying to do there. And then, wanted to talk about at least some opportunities, so not all negative, or not non-positive news here, but when we issue the bonds, we'll get the money and we'll sit on it. Then we can invest that money. So what we're doing then is, what can we use that money for that we're earning? So we're going to get $910 million, we're going to pay off the 41.5. So the rest of the money, what do we do with it? Well, we invest it based on what we think could be a draw schedule for the project, how fast the money's going out the door to pay project costs. So we got to be really careful about what it's invested in, but we think it's going to be $25, $30 million, somewhere in there. And hopefully it'll be much more than that, but I think that at this point, based on rough estimates, that's kind of what we're looking at. What you can use that money for, you can offset debt service in the immediate years. You can sit on it and use it for capital at the facility you finance. So it has to be kind of confined, at least my understanding of that is it has to be confined to what you're financing, what you improve. Normally it's either number 3 or number 1, which in number 3 is cost overruns, enhanced project scope. You can always do that just as long as it's at the facility you're doing to be, from a safe harbor perspective and be safe from that perspective. But you can also, easy one is just to pay debt service. That's an easy one. And talking about Public Works, there are some new facility efficiencies from staffing, utilities, and building maintenance costs there. So there are some efficiencies that I believe that they'll discuss more when, I think on April 14th. And I think they're here now if you have any questions about that. But, kind of going forward, the timing here is pretty important because we do have that note coming due on June 4th. So we do have some wiggle room, but not a ton, is how I like to phrase this. So we're closing the bond issue on June 3rd, the day before that note matures. A couple weeks before that, and it's very typical, about a 2-week, 3-week close. So you set you kind of work backwards from there. So the week of May 11th, we'll price the bonds. That's when we actually set the interest rates, sell the bonds to investors, and execute a purchase agreement. That's the valid binding contract. Week or two before that, that's when we market the issue. That's when the issue gets marketed to institutional investors, to the world with an offering document. And then, then the week, actually the same week generally, at least on this schedule, we have the third reading adoption on the 28th. So we're here today on the 24th. We have the committee meeting, Public Safety Committee of the Whole, on the 31st for a hopeful second reading of the legislation on the 14th, and then final reading on the 28th to allow us to get to the bond pricing in May and then close the day before the notes mature. No, that was a lot. But wanted to give you guys at least an overview of what we're thinking on the bond side. I'll entertain any questions, or if you want to hold those until the next meeting, that'd be, I'll be around.
We have a little time. Councilman Gallagher.
Mr. France, was that 25 to 40 million you anticipated that we would, you just said that, the money from the savings?
Is it anticipated?
You're saying it's between 25 and 40?
25 and 30.
25 and 30. So that would be to our gain.
Yes.
And you're wondering what to do with that?
Well,
if you were sitting in my seat, what do you think you would do with that? Give it back to the people that you just took it out of their pockets. That's what you should do with it. I have now borne witness to the greatest shell game in the history of Cuyahoga County. We're going to pass legislation to alter the original legislation to build a jail and a justice center for $1.4 billion. We're dropping the Justice Center. We're going to build a $1.1 billion jail. We're going to pay close to $2 billion, but we're talking about extra money and money we're going to think about spending somewhere else. And the original legislation was to build a jail and a Justice Center, nothing else. There were no holes. So where the hole became a hole isn't my concern. Our concern and our mission from the beginning has been to build a jail justice center. Not 25 extra million for spending for the whole. That doesn't exist. There's no hole. I've always said, we don't have a money problem. We got a spending problem. And how nobody up here head is spinning 360 on one building for almost the cost of two. And we're going to sit here and bob our heads. Well, I'm not going to. And I honestly feel sorry for the people that voted for this 0.25%. They were lied to then. They're being lied to now. This is a shell game. And I need $1.4 billion jail, Justice Center. This thing has exploded. It's either ignorance or incompetence, or both. This is insanity. Insanity. In 2013, I wrote a paper on the Juvenile Justice Center. 2013, read it. I gave it to everybody here that matters. Everybody here that matters has that. I bet you didn't read it. And in there, it tells you what not to do when you're building a jail justice center. And what do? We went right down that line. Then we have 3 years of this. Balled up for political play. This council had a plan, had a number, it was ready to go in April of 22. April of 22. Shenanigans by some folks in here, fine. We finally got it. Does anybody in this room recognize that we'd be in that jail right now? Last December, we'd be in that jail in Cleveland, keeping 1,100 jobs in Cleveland. But then I have to hear on the radio how we're the bad guys moving jobs out of Cleveland when the mayor of Cleveland at the time voted present on 1,100 jobs. That's fine. I can only control so much. I have taken this personal. I have put over 6 years of my life into this. I came back to this job to get the jail done. And as of today, I'm not voting for it. And anybody up here that votes for it's a goddamn fool. This is insanity. $1.1 billion for a jail when we handed a $1.4 billion bill to the administration. And we're all supposed to bob. I am absolutely beside myself. I am disgusted. And when the public finds out about this, and oh yeah, they're going to finally wake up that everybody's paying for this jail. And there was no hole mentioned 3 years ago, 6 years ago. Yesterday, I didn't hear about a hole. Now I know how the hole's getting filled by the original people that voted for this thing. If we're going to do this, revote. Let's see who's got the legs to go before their public, their taxpayers, and tell them, don't worry about it. It's for a jail. And we'll take care of the Justice Center later. And oh, we've got a hole we got to fill for $25 million a year. But don't worry, it's coming out of your pocket and we don't give a damn. This party's over. This has got to stop. I don't know what the solution is, but I would suggest and I would recommend it highly that everybody get into a room and figure this thing out. I have heard things up here today I cannot believe. I cannot believe I'm hearing them, but I'm hearing them. Extra money. It's a sales tax. Everybody pays the sales tax. This is going to affect everybody in the county. You wonder why everybody's leaving this county? And they are. I'm losing neighbors of 35 years. Going over to Lorraine, going over to Medina, going to Lake, going to Geauga. Why? They can't afford it here. We need to do what we're obligated to do and charged to do as best as we can do it. But what do? We tax more money, we take more money, we create holes, we fill the hole, and we got nothing but a financial pit that next December it's going to pop and we're going to fill it again. This has got to stop. And I really appreciate the position you were put in. I do. And the young lady, I get it. You're up here to do your job. I don't know who you talk to and why you talk to them, but when I saw all this, I didn't need to hear anything from you today because I knew it was a scam. We're all going to pretend that the $25 million a year is our obligation to fill. No, it's not. No, it's not. This is sickening. And I will hope, Mr. President, that you and the executive and the judges and the prosecutor and the public defender and everybody else that's going to be using this money, hopefully for the good, can come to an understanding of what we're doing here. Over $2 billion, close to $2 billion for a jail. There's nobody on that committee, and there's a couple people in the room today that were on that committee. Nobody can believe this. They can't believe it. I can't believe it. Can it be fixed? I don't know. I really don't know. But I am not going to vote for something that I have believed in from day one. I have taken my time out of my day. I'm obligated to do it. Nobody else did this. I thought it important enough that in 2013, this county was going to need a jail and a justice center. And in 2026, we're no closer. 2026, we're no closer than we were 13 years ago. So if you're going to go forward, let's revote on the 0.25% and see who's going to jump on that train. I can tell you right now, very few, if any, especially if you're using some of that tax money to fill a hole that was created by who? Not this council. Thank you, Mr. President.
Who else has questions? Councilwoman Simon.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So I need clarity as to follow up Councilman Gallagher's frustration. The 38-year bond that we're entering into, the obligation for 38 years, how much is going to be coming in? Just tell us again, how much generally? I want to know how much is going to come in, how much is going to go to debt service, and how much is going to be left over. Is that the chart?
Yeah, that's the chart. So column A there in the green,
Yep.
that's the sales tax revenues.
Okay, can you tell me what this means? Like, what's going to be left? Is there money for the court? I guess that's really my concern. Is there going to be money left after paying the debt service? And then if we don't put the money into closing that gap in the general fund, how much after over 38 years will be available for the court?
So the sales tax revenue that we have there in the green,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Then this is why it was just hard to put it up there.
I know.
And so-
That's why I need help.
I understand. So we're growing that at 2% based on the actual and the budget numbers from 26 and 27.
But that could be more, maybe.
It could be.
Could be
It
up,
could be.
could
And
be
we're
more.
hopeful that the 2% growth is conservative. We don't want to be aggressive. It's definitely less than the historic averages of growth. And then column B is really the debt service on the jail bonds here to fund the jail bonds. Column C is B minus, or A minus B. So that's the, I guess, the mauve coloring. It's kind of a weird color, so I apologize there. But that's the sales tax minus the debt service. So it starts in 24 million, grows to 88.5 million in 2064. Then column D there is the $25 million for the operating funds, the general fund. And then E is basically the remaining debt service minus that 25 million. I'm sorry, the remaining funds in that mauve color, so column C minus column D.
So potentially, it looks like we could have, if we divert the column C to the court, we would have some money to at least start addressing the court's needs, right?
Correct.
Yep, okay. And I think that's my only question. Do you know if there was money available for the court when we, I'm gonna I'm not going to ask you that. That's an administration question. Would we have money to bond out or capacity to bond out for additional court needs if, after this, if we approve this?
I would say yes, depending on all factors involved. I've said this before up here when we talk about debt capacity, that's usually not the problem, is the capacity. It's how we're paying for it. So if there's a project, maybe it's a single source project and we can get around some debt requirements or debt capacity restrictions from state law.
Have
There's
we
ways to
looked
do
into that? Have you looked at how we're going to fund either rehabbing the court or building a court? Have you been tasked with that mission?
Councilwoman, no, I have not.
So you've never even been asked, how are we going to handle the court needs?
I have not been privy to those.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? So, the less you borrow, the more you have to pay over 38 years. I'm wondering why we're capitalizing the interest to that extent, and why we wouldn't at least use the money that we get from the interest on the debt to pay part of what we would pay for the debt service in those first 2 years, so that we don't have to capitalize as much interest and pay money on it for 38 years.
Council President, it's a great question. And I think it comes down to, right now, there's not enough certainty on what those cash flows look like to project the investment income yet. This is just my best guess on some basic high-level percentage estimates of how much money is scheduled to come out every month. So, and I'm just kind of applying some numbers. I think the $25 to $30 million hopefully is low. I just don't want to put the county in a position where we're counting on that and it's not there because either the invoice came in late or the contractors came in different. There's a little bit of risk there on the project side that I just don't have the visibility on.
In your presentation, you described the security of the bonds as a limited tax general obligation. What about it is limited?
I'm going to ask Becky to give the legal description on that.
President Miller, limited tax means it's not a voted bond issue. A voted bond issue is backed by a tax unlimited as to rate or amount. Limited tax means you are within debt limitations and you are not securing a separate voted property tax to support the debt.
So it's not saying that the general obligation is limited. It's saying that it's a limited tax in that it wasn't a voted tax.
There's no new voted tax.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like we could go to 40 years, but somehow we settled on 38 rather than 40. How did we come to 38 as opposed to 35 or 40?
Council President, yeah.
I'm so sorry. I thought I was done. Revised Code 13320 has a laundry list of various project components. And what we are directed to look at, what are the various kinds of elements that make up the project? Bricks and sticks, if the whole project was bricks and sticks, it could be 40 years. But you will have furnishings and other assets that are lower-lived assets. So it's a weighted average of those components. We received a lot of background information on how much for furnishings, how much for equipment, how much, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We do the math, and that's how we come up to a maximum maturity. And I emphasize maximum. It's a weighted average. Under state law, that's the longest term you could have for this project, but it is a maximum. This council could always choose to issue the bonds for a shorter period of time.
So you're saying 38 years is the legal maximum? Are we giving any consideration for doing less than 38 years, or is 38 years the plan?
Council President, we've looked at a number of different scenarios with various terms. And, we looked at the affordability of it, and that's what determined, resting on the 38.
So
So the
38
annual
is the recommendation.
If my recommendation is, if we're doing this, to do 38, we do have, like a home mortgage, you do have the opportunity to refinance. You can shorten, you can pay things off. You can't extend it. So, and once we do 38 years, in 10 years, if we refinance, we can't go another 38 years. We can never exceed the maximum maturity of the original deal. So that's, so we'll have the opportunity to refinance, restructure, save money, hopefully in the future. But, for the affordability component of this, that I'm recommending that the 38-year be.
Anything else for today? Is there any miscellaneous business? I'd like to thank you again both very much for your time and service, and with no other business, the committee of the whole stands adjourned, and we will begin the regular